Check. 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 What you say?
Yeah, much better. Let's see. Take a picture.
And it is now time to interview the second candidate we have. So if the committee member would take their seats. We will ask Dr. Merrick if she will bring in our next candidate, Dr. Boyce Williams. Would you have a seat, please, Dr. Williams? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to say thank you so much on behalf of this committee for submitting your application for consideration for the Chancellor of Southern University at New Orleans. And I want to remind the committee members that Dr. Boyce Williams has had a rather unusual time in getting here. She was scheduled to be here last evening and had some mishaps, if you will, with the airline. And she only arrived very late this morning. And she will be leaving shortly after the interview this afternoon. So she is literally in and out. So we are cognizant of that, as well as cognizant of the time that we have with you. And we again thank you for allowing us to view your credentials for consideration of this position.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. We're going to start, we have a list of questions that we'd like to ask, and we have a time frame with which we expect to complete the questions and the answers. And it would be to your advantage to answer the questions as succinctly as possible in order that you may have the benefit of all the questions that we have to put before you. And before we get started with that, I would ask if you would have an opening statement.
Well, first of all, can you hear me okay? First of all, good afternoon, and thank you for receiving my materials and inviting me to meet with you this afternoon. I'm indeed humbled. I feel as though I've been a student of SUNO for almost 25 years. And I say that because I am a student. I'm a student of life. I'm a student of learning. I'm a student of leadership. And as you continue through your questions, hopefully I'll be able to address what I mean by that in terms of my affiliation and work with SUNO over the years in both academic affairs and in student affairs. So, and I'm just happy to be here.
Thank you. We have the questions that will be asked publicly, and following the public questions, we will go into executive session to ask more specific questions. And I'll start. I am Gloria Moultrie, and I serve as co-chair of this committee. I'd like to ask Dr. Williams, what do you see are your perception of the role of the Chancellor of Southern University at New Orleans? And what is it that you think makes you uniquely qualified for the position?
Thank you for that question. I think that the role of the Chancellor of SUNO would, if I might say SUNO, would be one of a thought leader, one of being a democratic leader, one of recognizing and understanding that academic engine rests with the faculty, that the lifeblood is with the students, that the health and maintenance is with facilities, and that student affairs is critical in terms of the mental and the overall well-being of our students. So as chancellor, I would see myself as someone who would be empowering, someone who would take charge, someone who would be interested in hard results, but not at the expense of morale and trust and honesty, and someone who's a team player, understanding that they'd be functioning in a system that houses 5 institutions and not 1. So the true leadership and guidance would come from the president and the board of that system. The implementation and the personalization of what that looks like would come from the chancellor for his or her institution.
Thank you. We will proceed by having the members of the committee to identify themselves and then ask their question.
Good afternoon, Dr. Williams. My name is Pam Marshall. My question is, what do you envision your first 90 to 120 days looking like and moving forward Southern University at New Orleans as chancellor?
Would the 90 days include, if I were selected, the letter that I might receive saying that I had been selected?
Let's go with your first official day here on campus. as
Official
chancellor.
day on campus. So if I may ask for permission from the president of the system, if I were selected, to ask each academic unit to do a self-study. And so that when I would arrive, I would know exactly from that particular unit, not specifically just academic, but across the campus, what the needs are, where they are in terms of their assessment, and how they see themselves moving forward. I think I would need to have that information before. Once I got to campus, my first 90 days would be to meet with the thought leaders on the campus. But before that, with the students, because that's why we're here. The thought leaders, and probably by the end of that first week, to have a town hall meeting where we would invite in all the stakeholders to discuss revenue, to discuss the reinvigoration of SUNO, our new buildings, our enrollment management, online learning, and try to get an assessment from our community stakeholders in terms of what their needs are. And how can we best support them in advancing that and being who we are to the New Orleans community. But I'd have to have all the background and all the data prior to that. That's why it would be important to have that self-study from the departments before arriving.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr.
My
Martin.
name is Frank Martin. I'm Chair of Business Administration. I am also a Spartan. Yes.
Are you going to homecoming this weekend?
No.
Okay.
I'd like to ask you this. If you are chosen as the Chancellor of Southern University at New Orleans, Doug Williams, what would SUNO, or what would you like for SUNO to look like in 5 years, 10 years from now?
That's assuming that it doesn't look like that now. Or,
However it looks now.
okay, all right.
How would you like?
SUNO has always had a special role. It has been, much like a lot of its campuses in the system, the people's university. And SUNO not only services the greater New Orleans area, but it also services the outlying areas. And if there was not a SUNO, students who represent the profile that are admitted to SUNO may not have any place to go. they may not have any place to go. So SUNO needs to retain its legacy. It needs to retain its identity as the university for the community. And your social work program is stellar. Your all of your programs are, as a matter of fact, but social work is the largest in criminal justice. And I think the role and the curriculum that you have embodied in those programs can be the economic engine that allows the city of New Orleans to be all that it should be and can be in terms of being a safe haven for all of our communities. And I think that's how SUNO ought to be seen. It ought to be that place that we go to in order to support and allow our city of New Orleans to continue to grow and to flourish. The other piece that I would add, and I think you're the only institution in the country that offers a PhD in museum studies. Is that right? Or in the region? And the master's. But we just opened in Washington the African American Studies Museum. And there's such a great opportunity for SUNO to be that leading partner with the museum, because they will continue to need to mine their collectibles. There'll be opportunities for internships. There'll be opportunities for online learning and those kinds of things. And I just thought about that when I was reading that, and then knowing we just opened that. So when you ask what would SUNO look like, that's how I see SUNO in terms of its role here in New Orleans, but also your signature on a national, international scale as well.
Dr. Williams and Dr. Kaltenbach. Louise Kaltenbach. An overview of your 3-year plan for improvement in the following areas, and I have 5 areas. Improvement in student enrollment, improvement in student retention, improvement in fundraising and fund development, an improvement of employee morale, an improvement in alumni relations. I'll go over this one by one again. Your 3-year plan for improvement in student enrollment.
You're going to repeat all of them, or are you just going to?
Would you like it A, B, C, D separately or together?
It doesn't matter.
Okay. Your plan for improvement, 3-year plan of improvement in student enrollment, student retention, fundraising and fund development, employee morale, and an alumni relations.
Okay. In terms of student enrollment, I look at that as being 3-pronged: admissions, retention, and then ultimately graduation. And I looked at your strategic plan over the last 3 years, and goal number 1 was actually access and success. And you've sort of outlined where you are and then how you've met those. But I think that it's important in enrollment that you're clear about the kind of students that you want to attract and you want to admit, because there are other institutions in this area, and you want to be clear so that when you create your metrics and using the data for success and ultimately graduation, that you are measuring it against what you said your goals were for the kinds and types of students that you want to admit to the institution. It's critical that enrollment plan be succinct, because the federal government has now tied student success, meaning retention and graduation, loan default, to financial aid that will be afforded to institutions of higher education. So the other piece, as it relates to enrollment, would include a piece on financial literacy, because I think that as students borrow money to do many things that they have to do, more than just pay tuition, that they need to understand what borrowing that money looks like, what it means, how are they going to pay it back, and have they in fact chosen the right profession or degree that's going to allow them to have a return on that investment.
two other parts to my question, well, three other parts. Was fundraising, fund development, employee morale, and alumni relations.
In terms of fund development and fundraising, revenue streams, I think you're sitting on a gold mine. I think that with all of the industries related to oil and fisheries and the chamber, your Economic Development Council, I think going to those entities and meeting with them on a regular basis and assessing what are their needs, what does a graduate from SUNO need to look like and to have, to know and be able to do in order to be employed by that. And that's how I think you build the kind of partnerships that you need to build and create not create, but enhance the brand of your institution. Invite persons from those industries to co-teach, to be adjunct professors. Look at your curriculum in terms of the business or education or social work, and whatever the employers are telling you, these are the kinds of candidates we need in order to be employable. Then enhance that curriculum so that it will meet those needs with the sanction and blessing, of course, and approval of the board and the president of the system. But as I look at reading all of the materials and whatnot, I actually think the federal government is wanting to fund institutions of higher education that are preparing persons to go into jobs that communities need. And I think you're poised and ready to do that. We would just have to write those grants and have to identify what those jobs are and where those areas are, and then submit the application and make sure that we're able to provide. But that's the direction that the federal government is going in. So I don't think that that's an issue, if that answers that part of your question. And you ask about
Employee morale and alumni relations.
I think morale and trust, integrity, and those kinds of things are extremely important. But I think the leader of your institution would have to be someone that would see all of those as byproducts of the deliverable. So if you increase your enrollment, you have a higher success rate. Faculty are engaged. Their voices are being heard. It is indeed shared governance, and everyone's viewed as a thought leader. Then the morale and the trust and the faith will come. But if your leader says, well, we have to build morale and we're going to have activities and we're going to have functions to do that, then that you can't, that's not going to get you what you need. You've got to have those hard, tangible outcomes. And once you see those and you feel those and you're a benefactor of those, then the others will come.
Hi, I'm Dr. Donna Grant, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs. Please tell us about the largest or most far-reaching impact you've had inside or outside your current or former organization. A, what was the context or situation? B, what exactly did you do? C, what did you accomplish? And D, what process did you use? And again, it says, please tell us about the largest or most far-reaching impact you've had inside or outside your current or former organization. What was the context or situation? What exactly did you do? What did you accomplish? What process did you use?
Thank you for that question. I think it's probably two-part, and it would be initially my experience at Elizabeth City State University when I was hired as head of the Division of Education. Elizabeth City did not have a college or a school of education. It had a division of education and psychology, and I was hired as the head of that unit and charged with the responsibility of making sure that they attained national accreditation from NCATE. And if they didn't get it over a 2-year period, then the institution was going to be closed and subsumed by East Carolina University, or it was going to become a community college. And I had come out of the administration in East Lansing of public schools, and I thought that when I heard the word NCATE, that it was actually a disease. I didn't know what it entailed. I didn't know that while it was accreditation for education, that it was really university-wide accreditation. And without the support and engagement of faculty in arts and sciences, there was no way that that unit of education was going to be accredited. So I found myself very quickly forging partnerships and relationships and working and presenting and chairing the university curriculum committee in an effort to bring together a unit that would allow that institution to become successful with national accreditation. And it was. And it was the first time it had been accredited, so much to the point that it received all standards met with 7 strengths and no weaknesses. And that was when I got a call from the president of the National Council for Accreditation of Teacher Education in Washington asking me if I would be a part of his team. And that was how I got to Washington. After having been in that position for about 4 or 5 years and working with all 768 institutions in these United States and territories who were seeking accreditation, I felt that I was comfortable enough to go after private monies from various foundations, because I discovered that while Elizabeth City State University had achieved national accreditation, only 38% of all of the HBCUs were nationally accredited. And I knew how important that accreditation was to the lifeline for that institution and for its existence. So I actually went after monies from the Foundation Eli Lilly, the NEA, to create a national network of support, targeting and working with our HBCUs towards national accreditation. We offered funding, we developed a technical support network, and I'm pleased to report that SUNO was one of those institutions that was nationally accredited. And today, 89% of the 84 HBCUs that prepare educators are nationally accredited as a result of that work that we began, or that I began, at Elizabeth City State University. So when you talk about a hallmark and how you did it, but I didn't do it by myself. It was a technical support network of persons from our institutions around the country where we galvanized together and formed a team to actually support our institutions, because we believe if one failed, we all failed.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Doctor. My name is Ben Johnson. Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
So my question's similar, but a little different emphasis. If you could share an experience in short and long range tactical and strategic planning. And in doing that, talk about your role, what process you used, and what was the outcome? Want me to say that again? Okay. If you share an experience that you've had in short and long range tactical and strategic planning, and include your role, the process that was used, and what was the outcome?
I think that the example that I gave to Dr. Grant actually spoke to the long term. The short term was, in fact, getting that institution accredited and employing a process that worked with all units on the campus through academic affairs. That was a short term. The long term was coming to that national organization and trying to figure out how you're going to take that model of inclusion and teamwork and make it national, so that all of the institutions that have some of the same similar characteristics and are serving the same types of populations are at the table and come off of the menu.
Could you talk just a tad about the process?
The process, so the process was identifying those institutions who were nationally accredited, asking the presidents of those institutions if they would serve on an advisory committee to strategize and buy in, if you will, and sign on, if you will, and sign off on the value of accreditation for their institution. Because standards, that's the only way you're going to assure the public that your program is in fact credible and that parents want students to go there. So that was the process that we used initially. We had an advisory group of college presidents representing those institutions. It was a top-down, bottom-up. The presidents at that point, we all met together with the deans and directors of the respective institutions, and we developed and we talked about what that technical support needed to look like. So we did not ignore those institutions like the Michigan States or the University of Wisconsin at Madison or the Chapel Hills. If they had board members and they were a part of that process, we brought them in too to be a part of the network because we couldn't do it by ourselves. And so we actually developed a network of about 500 reviewers and supporters that actually went onto the campuses with grant money to support those institutions in meeting and putting in place strategies and programs in order to not only achieve the accreditation, but to maintain it. And to this day, even though the money is not there, there are still persons, perhaps at this table, that know that that network still exists, and those consultants and others are going out doing the same kind of work to support institutions to remain at the table.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Williams, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Chester Mills in English and foreign languages. My question is this: from what you know of the state of Louisiana, what do you think are the principal issues facing post-secondary education at this time?
If you look over the last 4 to 5 years, the amount of funding that's coming from the state is virtually, and so institutions in all of our states, but in particular with your oil industry and having been so dependent on it, are having to look at alternative ways to support and deliver and continue to deliver the quality programs that they've been delivering in the past. So when you say what challenges, I think the fundraising, I think the revenue stream, I think enrollment. One of the things were you asking for Louisiana or were you wanting me to drill down to SUNO?
I was asking about the state of Louisiana and the principal issues facing post-secondary education at this time.
Fiscal, and how do presidents and chancellors look at alternative revenue streams? Online education it's a challenge because we all want to do it, but when we look at the success and the graduation and the continuance of persons and retention in online programs, we don't have the results that we necessarily need to have. So that has become a challenge, and I know that it's a challenge in Louisiana as well. The graduation rates for all of the institutions, excluding maybe one or two, you have your enrollment, you have your recruitment, but that 6-year graduation rate is very important and is very critical. This is not a problem for your institution, but I don't think, but not sexual assaults in that way, but sexual assault and harassment and race relations are critical, and they are important in the state of Louisiana and in higher education. And I think we can just look to some of the incidents that have occurred over the last, several years and in particular months to look to address that. But I think the number one would be the revenue stream, and how are we going to look at alternative ways to get the monies that we need in order to offer the quality programs to attract the students. The Graduation Act is a challenge for some of our institutions in the state of Louisiana because it's now tied to ACT scores, where some of us have been open admissions or have taken students where they are. We still graduate them, but you've got measures now that are being levied onto our institutions where they're prescriptive. And you've got to do it on the front end, and that's going to impact your enrollment.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Suzette Ermler, and I'm a graduate student at the School for Social Work. What do you think are the key problems facing HBCUs today? And what solutions do you feel can help resolve these problems?
Enrollment. As states have upped the entrance requirements across the country for students getting into programs, that becomes a challenge because historically our institutions have, that's who we are. We represent and we service underserved and underrepresented populations. And we take them where they are and we graduate them. But as they've levied these higher entrance requirements and standardized test scores and all of those kinds of things, it makes it difficult to have the kind of enrollment, even though you know that you can graduate them. The loan default, 90% of our students on our campuses generally get some form of aid. They can't go to school without it. They also have responsibilities for families, for parents, they're major caregivers, and they borrow money and they graduate and they incur all of this debt. And now you've got the federal government saying that you aren't going to get financial aid because of the percentage of your loan default rate on the students that you're graduating from your institutions. And that's really not fair. That puts the HBCUs at a disadvantage because such a large percentage of their population are receiving financial aid. And that's why the financial literacy piece and working with students to help them understand. So those are challenges that I think the most. We've never had the federal government step into states' rights and then ultimately local rights in the way that we have them doing right now. And it's penetrating and punishing and penalizing those institutions that serve underserved and underrepresented populations. Couple that with the fact that when you talk about college affordability, most of our HBCUs are affordable. But we don't tell that story. This is a state institution, and your curriculum is the same as any other state institution in Louisiana that's offering that program. Your cost calculator for bang for your buck is far less, and that needs to be publicized. That needs to be branded. It needs to be on the website. So while we have challenges that are facing us, we're doing more with less. And as they continue to cut, we continue to still do more with less. So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword that the requirements are going to continue to come. They're going to continue to levy loan default, all of that towards our financial aid. But at the same time, we've got to make the case to our public that you're going to get the same education. Our faculty are just as qualified because we're a state institution, and this is what it's going to cost you, parents. And I don't know if that.
Yeah, in terms of speaking to solutions, yes.
Okay.
Those are so things like this public education.
Good afternoon. My name is Hazel Pitts. As state support to higher education continues to decline, what will you do to improve the overall financial condition of Southern University at New Orleans? And what kind of experience do you have in gaining external support for initiatives both from the public and nonprofit sectors?
repeat.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
You all have some multifaceted questions.
Okay.
Complex.
This is Southern University at New Orleans.
See, that's what I'm looking, and it doesn't cost it, but look what I'm getting. I mean, this is something. Wow.
Okay.
Go ahead.
As state support to higher education continues to decline, what will you do to improve the overall financial condition of Southern University at New Orleans? And what kind of experience do you have in gaining external support for initiatives from both
Students and to have our businesses there as partners. In terms of my own experience, when I mentioned Dr. Grant's first question relative to the technical support network, I was able to secure private funding to support that, almost $1 million over the course of, and I didn't tell you, we were able to do that in 3 years. We were able to get institutions who were not accredited in a 3-year period with funding. I've also secured $5 million, to which SUNO was a part of that as well, for a reading grant. Several years ago, 37 institutions were a part of that. That was under the Bush administration, Reading First. And it was the first time that NCAID, a nonprofit organization, had taken money or secured funding from the federal government. And the president of NCAID would never do that, because he said that the accountability that you have to respond to for the federal government was more than he wanted to handle. That when you do private dollars, you have more flexibility, but when you take money from the federal government, every I must be dotted and every T must be crossed. And he told me that if you think you can do it, then you do it. And I did it. And so we got $5.2 million over a 2-year period to support Hispanic serving, Indian serving, Asian Pacific Islanders, and then 17 HBCUs, and helping and working with faculty and best scientific research practices for teaching reading across campuses in all areas, in the content areas. I've been successful in getting money from the Toyota, from the Ford Foundation, most recently $3.5 million, again, to which SUNO was a part of, for the student retention and success grant. That was a few years ago. The other work that I've done with SUNO and the monies have been directly outgrowths or with academic affairs, but this particular one was clearly student affairs. And SUNO was selected from about 57 applications to be a recipient for that grant, which was, again, private funding through the Walmart Foundation. And the work that you are doing with retention and the model that you had in place allowed SUNO to become a mentor to Drake State Institution in Alabama. So your mentee was Drake State, and you, in fact, were the mentor. And I think some of the success that you're experiencing now has come out of that work that we did with the Walmart grant about 2 or 3 years ago. And that was private funding. Toyota, when I was at NAFIO, we do a publication of profiles in higher education. And it's a document that identifies all of the HBCUs and the predominantly Black institutions, gives a history on them, talks about the president. It's a profile. And we needed money to publish it this particular year, and we didn't have it. And so I went to Toyota and asked them if they would do the back cover. We would put a Camry on the back cover of the document if they would give us the money that we needed to to market that publication, not thinking that they would say yes, but they did. So I can give you other examples. I think some of that's in my CV. I know I don't have much time, but I hope that gives you a broad stroke of private and federal.
Since you mentioned time, we are looking at our time here, and we still have a number of questions that need to be asked. So again, it would be to your advantage, Dr. Williams, to have the questions asked and answers very succinct, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Igwe Ude, and I'm the Dean of the College of Business. Welcome. My questions have to do with facilities. There are three parts. The first is, what is your experience in requesting capital outlay funding for new projects or deferred maintenance? Question number two is, what roles have you played in developing campus master plan for future growth?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What roles have you played in developing a campus master plan for future growth? And the third question is, are you familiar with the goals and objectives of the ADA code compliance? ADA code compliance.
Disabilities Act? Yes. That one's easy. She said succinct, yes, to the last part. Your campus outlay, I've not been in a position on a campus to be involved in that. But would I be able to manage? Would I be able to? Absolutely, because you surround those areas that you're deficient in, you surround yourself with those persons and professionals who in fact are the masterminds and are the experts. So I have to be honest on that. And in terms of facilities and new projects, the facilities that I've been involved in have not been on college campuses, but rather in the public school setting, where I was an administrator in East Lansing for about almost 10 years, and building new middle schools and elementary schools in East Lansing, Michigan.
Good afternoon, Dr. Williams. I'm Leatrice Lattimore. If you will, please explain your involvement in the development of enrollment management programs and what approach you would use to ensure the existence of effective enrollment strategies for Southern University at New Orleans.
I think that, well, I don't know if that, I know what we did with the Walmart project, and we worked with 10 institutions, and it was specifically enrollment management would have been the recruitment, selection, and retention. But developing a marketing plan and a strategic enrollment revenue plan. So how many students what goals do you have? You have projected, but that's not what we want. We want to know what goals you have, and that's why it's important to identify the types of students that you're going to be admitting. Making sure that you don't put all your eggs in the front end, that you have equal time devoted to both recruitment, retention, and ultimately graduation, and possibly more even in terms of retention and graduation because of the federal guidelines that are coming down that are tied directly to financial aid for that institution to even be in existence. Build the recruitment plan that you're going to use by design and not by chance. So that you actually design what you want it to look like and how you're going to implement it, and not we're going to have X number of students coming out of Delgado Community College or what have you, just by chance, but do it by design. Develop a metric system where you actually track your marketing and your recruitment strategies. And that you measure them on a regular timely basis, so that you have the kind of data that you need to make the informed decisions that you need to make. But the enrollment plan has to be something that's strategically designed and carried out, and not just we have to have X number of students this semester, so we're going to go to every high school and pass out applications. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, But you need to have a strategic plan for what it is that you want.
Afternoon, my name is Louis Blackman. As the Chancellor, how would you communicate with students in determining their needs and interests?
Fireside chats on a regular basis, a monthly basis with students, starting with student government. Again, doing the self-study we talked about, asking faculty to do for their departments. We would want student government or student affairs to coordinate something like that so that the chancellor would know what are the needs, what are the concerns of the students, because we only exist because of the students. That's why we're an institution of higher education. But just as you have your regular monthly meetings or your leadership team meetings or your dean meetings or your advisory meetings, you'd have the same meetings with the students. You all don't have dormitories as such, but wherever students hang out in terms of the student union, I don't know in terms of your student affairs office, I would imagine there are planned meetings and events and those kinds of things, but regular contact and communication with students on an ongoing basis, because again, that's the lifeblood of the institution. Voices matter.
Hello, Dr. Williams. Can you hear me?
Ms. Ramirez.
Is it on? Okay. Yes, I'm Professor Cynthia Ramirez, and I am the president of the Faculty Senate here at SUNO. And my question is about faculty issues. So what is your experience in dealing with faculty issues, and what are your views on faculty involvement and issues concerning academia and the university?
Faculty are the academic engine for the institution. And the work that I've been doing over the last 3 years with my business, the National Alliance of Learning, I've worked and am currently working with 4 institutions. Because what I do is go in and work with institutions on meeting national standards so that they can become accredited. 2 of those institutions are in states where the union is very, very, very strong. And I might be on campus when the contract says they don't need to be on campus, and they won't be on campus, or I might be there during the summer. But I have to say that I have not had any problems because I've involved and engaged the union and the Senate simultaneously in charting the direction and what the goals are and making sure that I understand what the parameters are and the work that I need to do. And then in some cases, the Senate has actually stepped in and spoken to faculty. This is what we need to do and we have to do, so let's galvanize and work. But I don't take the faculty senate or unions lightly. And that's just been my work as a consultant. But I never thought I could say that I've been that engaged. But we have a situation at one institution right now where yesterday we were with the union president and the Senate chair. So that's kind of been my most recent experience over the last 3 years. And I could talk to you offline more about that if you'd like.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Williams. My name is Gretchen Bradford. And the question that I'm going to ask you is, how do you plan to engage, retain, and attract the corporate and small business communities? List at least 2 specifics.
Earlier, I think I said that I would actually meet with them. I would ask when the chamber meets, when your Economic Development Council meets, any business partnerships or any stakeholders, your oil, fisheries, actually ask to be put on the agenda, meet one-on-one, go out to lunch, have dinner. And then try to forge, well, not try to forge, but forge the kind of partnerships and collaboratives that you need in order to be able to supply and demand take much time, but my sole purpose was to do outreach to HBCUs and their alumni associations to talk about financial literacy and obesity and elder law care and those kinds of things. And the Southern University Baton Rouge Law Center was just a recipient of a $150,000 grant to look at elder law care for AARP in the African American community as a result of the outreach to the Alumni Association at that institution. So alumni, making sure that you meet on a regular basis with the alumni, that when they invite you, that you show up and you participate and you engage, and it is indeed a partnership. And that would be true for all the entities that you mentioned. You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Dr. Williams. I'm Frank Williams, and I have a question. You've touched on some of these items already, but there are a couple more that I think you might want to articulate on further. Give an example of what you would do to engage stakeholders, including students, faculty, staff, faith-based organizations, business leaders, K-12 arena, and legislators that you feel most effective for you, and also give an example where you felt less effective engaging these groups. Can you hear me? Sorry about that. I'll say it again. Give an example of what you would do to engage stakeholders, including students, faculty, staff, faith-based organizations, business leaders, K-12 arena, and legislators that you feel most effective for you. Give an example where you felt less effective engaging these groups.
Okay, I got the first part. And what was the last part? Give an example of
Where you felt less effective engaging these groups.
what
Where
I
you
felt.
thought you had your most challenges in those areas.
Well, town hall meetings are key for all of the stakeholders that you mentioned. And out of those town hall meetings, you'll be able to glean where specific areas of interest are or concern, and then you can meet with those groups in smaller subsets if you have to. But the town hall meeting would be the initial. And where I had the most challenge, because I've done everything that you've said in the work that I've done over the years, but the most challenging
Group or most challenging arena where you've had least success in dealing with.
Now, who were the stakeholders again?
Community, business leaders, K-12, legislators, faith-based organizations.
Legislators.
I knew that.
Legislators. Yeah, legislators. And you can meet as a group, but you have to really court and coach and do a lot of hand-holding and empowering and engaging and making them feel the most important in order to, and it takes a long time sometimes, but I would say legislators. And that's from being in Washington all these years. But some of my best friends are in the Congressional Black Caucus because I did all those things.
Good afternoon, Dr. Williams.
Yes.
My name is Ron Minkowski. You will be overseeing a complex organization with people from a variety of different perspectives. The question would be, what would be 2 or 3 principles that you would use for getting things accomplished in this kind of an environment with that complexity?
Listening, hearing, compassion, understanding, sensitivity, knowledge,
My name is Beverly Fabre, and the question that I have, describe the toughest administrative challenge that you faced in your professional career. What is that challenge? How did you respond? And what was the outcome?
The challenge was probably back in 2000 when the National Council for the Accreditation was redoing its standards, and it moved from, and again, accreditation is the only assurance the public has that an institution is preparing qualified candidates in any particular area, and that's what I do. But the challenge became, someone realized that 89% of all of the HBCUs that prepared teachers were nationally accredited. And they couldn't say that for the majority institutions. They couldn't say it for the research ones. They couldn't say it for the HSIs. And as they began to, groups started meeting, they wanted to get rid of the diversity standard. And they also wanted to put in tiered accreditation so that institutions of a certain, whatever might be a tier 1 accredited institution, and I think you know where I'm going with that. And so institutions who had less funding, who didn't have as many students, whose SAT scores weren't as high, whose GPAs weren't as high, who didn't have the high passage rates on the first time takers, would then probably be third tiered accreditation. And the biggest challenge was fighting 33 national organizations, including the NEA and the AFT and the Council of Chief State School Officers and the host of others, to not go with that model. And so I don't know how long they'll be able to hold on to it, but in these United States, as we speak today, if an institution is accredited by the accreditor for teacher education, there's no tiered accreditation. You're either accredited or you're not. LSU is accredited, SUNO is accredited. Stanford is accredited, SUNO is accredited. The same set of standards, no tiered accreditation. You either meet it or you didn't. And that was a major, major challenge and battle. And we won. We won.
We want to thank the members of the committee who've asked the questions to this point, but we do have a question that President Belton would like to ask.
Good afternoon, Dr. Williams.
Good afternoon, Dr. Belton.
It's a pleasure engaging with you once again. I'm very much aware of your long history of really advancing the interests of HBCUs, and pleased that you expressed the interest in advancing the goals of Southern University in New Orleans. So earlier you spoke about some of the challenges of higher education and particularly HBCUs. I want to put something in context for you, such that in the state of Louisiana, and I think you're aware of our challenges generally, the fact that institutions of higher education has been burdened with reoccurring budget cuts for the last 8 years. Institutions like Southern, SUNO in particular, because of the GRAD Act, has had to increase their admission standards, which has resulted in declining enrollment. This institution as well has been required, if you will, to use state general fund dollars to ensure that they have an environment conducive to learning. So they invest even more in their facilities, disproportionate to any other institutions of higher education. And so each year then we stand before the legislature and we justify our mission. And I have publicly said that Southern University and our campuses are seen as nothing more than regional institutions whose population just happen to be Black. So you're aware of the challenge as relates to HBCUs, their mission. And I want you to just kind of put yourself in the role of the chancellor of this campus, engaging with legislators before a committee. How would you, in effect, articulate the value of HBCUs generally, and particularly that of Southern University, New Orleans? You are aware of the matrix that tend to define this institution unfairly. So how do you how do you articulate and argue that Southern University New Orleans is a great investment for the state of Louisiana?
Dr. Belton, thank you for that question. It's very thought-provoking. That's why I think it's so important for SUNO to have the kind of business partnerships and collaboratives with the community of entrepreneurs here in New Orleans so that they can say, this institution is supplying this percentage or this number of their graduates to our workforce. SUNO is doing that because we've partnered with them and we're working with them in tandem. And I think if you come to the table to the legislators, SUNO does as the chancellor, and you bring those businesses and those partners with you, and you can give the data that shows that you're actually working with them, that that they are depending on you in terms of criminal justice, in terms of social work, in terms of your oil or your fisheries, then I think that's one of the ways that you would address them in terms of justifying it. Takes it out of the context of SUNO just being there, but rather it being an invaluable resource to that community. The other thing I think, if I might say this, sometimes we think of SUNO as strictly being New Orleans, but you have outlying areas that surround New Orleans where you attract and you bring in students and they enroll in your institution. And I think in terms of your diversity, I saw in that strategic plan, if you can give statistics relative to the diversity of the enrollment at SUNO, it's just not that school over there that has Black students, but rather it represents the larger community and all of the diversity that exists within that New Orleans area. I think that becomes critically important. And when I was reading in your history, was it in 1975, there was a woman who actually, some legislation that came on the books that said that SUNO would admit students from all races? It was founded in 1959, but in 1975, so I think you're always going to be historically Black. And no one's going to ever take that away from you. But in terms of making sure that your diversity reflects not only the cultural diversity, but the economic diversity and the religious diversity, and come at it from that perspective, that would be one answer.
Thank you.
And that person was Ms. Veltupal, that suit. You've had a number of questions asked of you, and you've answered a number of questions, and you provided information in your introduction. Given all of what has been said, is there anything else, Dr. Williams, that you'd like to share with the group as a closing comment?
I think that, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I've learned some things about myself as I've listened to your questions. I feel eminently ready to accept whatever the challenge and the charge is. I would love to go with you so that we could grow together. I would love to go with you so that we could grow together. I think that this is a critical time, in particular for Louisiana, and as Dr. Belton said, for SUNO. I don't take that lightly. I've had a lot of experience on a policy level. You probably say that on a national level, whatever. But the real buck is really what happens on the college campus. And with those students, you can't even get to there unless you start and understand here. And I think that the breadth and depth, I don't take it lightly. And I would just welcome the opportunity to work with you and to growing together to the next level. I think that's what I'd like.
We want to thank you very kindly for your public interview. And we thank our audience for being with us. But at this time, there are some questions that we need to ask in executive session. So we, at this moment, if you will entertain a motion to go into executive session. Is there a second?
I second.
It has been moved and second that we go into executive session. Any questions? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Thank you. We will go into executive session. Thank you so much.